It takes an openness to learn from everything and heed the calling of your soul to move toward greater love, acceptance, and a better life filled with blessings. Do your inner work. So today, as I've said, we're launching this summer showers of blessing. And that means for the next 3 months, we're going to be on a quest to increase the flow of good stuff in our lives. It's what we all want, right? It's what we all want. You know, each of us might identify different types of good stuff that we desire. You know, we all have a lot of good stuff in our current status quo, but because we're all still breathing, we have this inborn desire for growth and expansion. It's what makes us alive. You know, so I can tell you're all still breathing, at least I think you are. So I know that you have something inside of you that you desire to grow and expand. And some of us may want a better living situation. Some of us may want a more fulfilling job. Some of us don't want that. Some of us may want more friends or fun or better financial experience. Some of us want greater health and vitality. So yeah, we might all single out a few specific things, but all of us can agree on one word, and that is blessings. We all want to be blessed. And this summer is about opening up the flow of greater blessings to you. To you. And my talk, as I title, is What is Mine to Do? Because guess what? There are some spiritual principles at play in your life that you have to learn to relate to better. And when you do, greater blessings flow. It's an internal job for sure. And it's about identifying as that soul being that we all are. So in so many prior lessons, I've laid the foundation that in order to have a more full and satisfying life, we've got to do the work internally to shift our cause so that our effects can be better, right? We got to do that internal spiritual work to heal our thoughts and our self-esteem so we're putting better energy out into the world that returns as better energy forms to us as the blessings we desire. So in other words, we got to heal inside if we want the outside to flourish and grow as a result. So today I want to talk about the how. I want to talk about the how, where you can start on your inner work. And this is kind of a foreshadowing of the types of things we're going to be talking about throughout our classes this summer. Because as I see it, I think there are 4 main areas of focus if we're going to unblock our flow and heal ourselves internally. The first one is to challenge and release our fears. The second one is to understand and move beyond our wounds. The third is to tell ourselves a better story. And the fourth is to get help if we need help with those 3 other things I just said. So let's dive into the first one, challenge and release our fears. So as I see it, our entire life journey is about moving away from fear and closer to love. Now, you can say that a whole bunch of different ways. You can use different words in place of fear and love. You could say, I'm going to move away from judgment and more into acceptance. I'm going to move away from isolation and more into connection. Away from anger, closer to joy. Anxiety, closer to peace. Away from resentment and closer to forgiveness. Away from who we were taught to be and closer to our natural selves. All of those phrases are saying the same thing, move away from fear and closer to love. Okay? Once we get all the limiting fears instilled in us when we're young, it's time to start unraveling them, right? Conquering them. So whatever you were taught to fear or avoid or judge, they're all false beliefs that do not have a spiritual basis. Are you going to have scary experiences on the human plane? Yep, you are. Is God inside you bigger than any of that? Yes, God is. Is there something bigger going on the whole time? Yes. Yes. Our soul knows that. Our soul knows it as well. It's our human self that's got to wrestle with our that. So our job is to use our five senses, our intelligence, our heart, our gut, to help us navigate our journey so that, number one, we stay alive as long as possible, but to never stop living while we do it. So our fragile little ego cells, you know what they would like to do? Our little human ego cells, they'd like to lock us in a pillow-lined room with yummy food and no exposure to harmful sunlight or radiation of any sort, no exposure to people who will hurt our feelings or cause injury, no exposure to ridicule or teasing, basically not exposure to much of anything that would challenge our sense of safety and well-being. But we would be safe and alive longer, right, if we could live in that kind of environment. But is that living? Is that living? Do the blessings really flow inside a pillow-lined room all by yourself somewhere? I haven't found that to be the case. So while most people don't go to the extreme of letting fear run our lives and ruin our lives that way, we all have fears that limit us in some ways. And yeah, we probably all have those big fears like germs and jumping off tall buildings and normal things like that, or the random shark at the beach. But some fears have a greater impact in our life expressions than those big fears, right? And these fears are more insidious and harder to heal. The fear of not being good enough. Actually, AI gave Susan several of them. I was smiling over there. The fear of not being good enough, the fear of unworthiness, the fear of being judged, the fear of never being loved, the fear of not being able to pay bills for the rest of our lives, the fear of not belonging, the fear of being different and never being accepted. Those are mama jama fears. Those are big fears, right? And doing our inner work is about identifying each of our fears and not accepting them as the final word over our lives. We got to challenge them. And it's about getting out like our spiritual magnifying glass and examining, where did that fear come from? Who installed it? How are you maintaining it? And figuring out what the real truth is. So many of us were taught fears related to blessings, related to money and wealth and basically being blessed in general, right? Maybe you were exposed to fear of wealthy, powerful people. Maybe you were taught to fear losing everything. So many of those kinds of fears are in there somewhere. And over the summer, we're going to be specifically looking at fears that block that energy flowing in our lives. Basically, if there is any human being anywhere that's not afraid of what you're afraid of, your fear can be released and healed too. And part of that healing is understanding how the fear helped you get this far in life. So like Susan was saying, it's an echo. Like you needed that fear at that moment, but then you just let it keep echoing in your life and kind of changing things. And maybe that fear has helped you keep from getting people angry at you, or maybe it has helped you avoid, tough assignments and expectations, or maybe it has helped you get other people to assist you. If I'm afraid, someone's going to help me, right? So that's a good thing. Maybe it's simply kept you from looking more closely at the things that happened in your life. Not even going to look at it. The deal is we only keep fears that help us in some way. So sometimes the question is, why do I still have this fear? How did you get the fears that you carry around? And many times the fears are developed as a result of a childhood wound, which leads me to my second topic, understanding and moving beyond our wounds. Do you know what wounds are? When I say wounds, what I'm talking about are the moments and situations, experiences in life that shifted how you view yourself. In the past, I've shared, I experienced teasing and bullying as a result of my appearance as a child. And I've also shared in the past about my rageaholic father. And most of you know that I was raised in like a fundamentalist Christian cult-like situation. Another one of my wounds came from being a lesbian in a homophobic culture, during my formative young adulthood years, right? Those are all wounds. And your wounds are going to be different than mine, but probably had the same result, right? Wounds cause us to doubt our worth, question whether God loves us, drives us to numbing behaviors like drugs or alcohol or gambling. We talked about all this in Sacred Cup. All the things that make us stop feeling the feels, right? Shopping and hoarding and things like that as we self-soothe in less ideal ways. Wounds often trigger emotions we don't know how to deal with, like anxiety and depression and rage. And at the extreme level, wounds even cause us to consider ourselves or other human beings as less than worthy of our very breath or existence. And wounds can come from anywhere. They can originate in the home or school or church or wherever we interact with other human beings, but they can also originate when we have an experience that may not involve another soul, but scares us so badly we develop fears that we just can't seem to let go of. Take a deep breath. So many things happen in our childhood that are beyond our power to change or shift them. And it's a child's nature to somehow feel like whatever is happening is all our fault. You know what I'm talking about, right? We get wounded through all of these things that I mentioned, and we assume that it's because we did something bad or wrong, or we simply are bad or wrong. And we're taught that things happen to us when we misstep or disrespect or make a mistake. That's when things happen. So I must have done something to cause all of this. We're blamed for whatever's going on basically because the adult in the situation doesn't want to take responsibility for the situation. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So doing our inner work is about gently, but insistently gaining greater understanding and perspective about our wounds and turning to look at them instead of avoiding them, learning how to talk about them and have a greater realization of all we are not alone. We're not alone. You know, this morning in Sacred Cup, I don't even remember who said it. Somebody said something really vulnerable, and it happens often in classes. Someone will have the courage to share this wounding experience, something that causes them either great shame or sorrow to tell. And after I thank them for trusting me with their story, what do? I say, if anybody can relate to that person, raise your hand. Because what I'm trying to do is let everyone know we're all in this together. We may not have had that very situation, but we had something similar. We had that same we hold our hands up in solidarity because we had the same feeling about something in our life. Something similar happened. Yes, I have felt those same waves of fear or shame, and I've never, not once, asked that question. Everybody's like, not me, not me. Everybody's like, me too, me too. We had the same kinds of things happen. And to that I always say, whatever happened to you may have felt abnormal or wrong or wholly inappropriate, but if you had the experience, it's a normal human experience. It's normal. It's normal. And once again, we can begin to understand that if it was normal, we can begin to consider with compassion all the other people in the situation. And then we can begin to see the work that can be done to disentangle our identity with that wound. Right? Some say life is about lessons. And I agree. But I want to point out a really important thing. The lesson is not in the experience itself. That's not the lesson. The lesson comes in from what we get from the experience. We have to shift our focus away from the experience itself and instead focus on learning whatever the experience can teach us. That's where the lesson is, not in the experience itself. So many woundings block our flow of blessings because they make us feel unworthy of a big, amazing, beautiful life. Right? How many of you get a little bit uncomfortable when I say blessings are just going to flood all over you? If that makes you a little uncomfortable, it's probably because there's some feeling of unworthiness in there somewhere. Somewhere along the way, we get the idea that blessings we desire are not available to us. So we settle for less than what we know would be better. We lower our expectations, and when we do that, guess what? The universe goes, okay, we're going to give a lower experience. That's what they expect. We got to work on that, right? So today I'm suggesting that when we do our inner work and start healing our wounds and release our identity with the wound, we take down the structures of our lives that we built to protect us from the triggers of our wounds, and we actually get help to appreciate what we got from the experience so that we can start telling ourselves a different story. A story, instead about what happened, we tell a story about what we learned. Different story, right? So my third point is about doing our inner work, is about changing our story. So the way that we talk about ourselves and our lives are going to change this summer. There's this old Buddhist teaching. It's not a quote, Rebecca. There's this old Buddhist teaching that says this, and this is from Dhammapada. He said, "He has insulted me. He has abused me. He has robbed me. He who lives with these thoughts will never be free from hatred, for hatred never conquers hatred. Hatred is conquered only by love. This is the law." That's a Buddhist teaching. Sounds like Martin Luther King Jr., doesn't it? But it is from old Buddhist teaching. Hatred never conquers hatred. Words of anger and resentment are not healing. The law is that love is the path to healing. Forgiveness and kindness and generosity is the path to healing. But when we've been hurt, we just want to close in on ourselves and protect. And doing so takes us off the path to healing. We've got to stay on the path of love. Our words are powerful. That's a given. We've learned that around here. The way we talk about ourselves teaches others and the universe and the world how to treat us. If we are talking constantly about our hurtful experiences, we're defining ourselves as wounded or a victim, broken, weakened, defeated, bitter, whatever. We're the victim. We continue to give power to the past. We continue to carry the blame for the situation or try to put the blame on someone else, which completely shuts down our self-esteem. So when we describe the stories of our lives, it's really important to notice who has the power in your story. Who is making the decisions? Who is leading the situation? If our words diminish our ability to make a fresh choice, we know all the power is somewhere in the past. What is your today choice about any of it? What did I learn, or am I learning from whatever happened? That's the most important part of the story. So I want to give you a personal example. I want to tell a little brief version of a childhood story some of you have heard before, and then I'm going to talk about a new way I found to look at it. So this story happened when I was about 9 years old. And my grandmother, if I lived here, my grandmother lived like an hour west of us. And my Aunt Bev lived about 5 or 6 hours east of us. And Nana was planning a trip to go see my Aunt Bev. And she invited me to go on this road trip with her. Now, you know I'm one of 3 kids, and I was chosen. I got to go on the trip. And she would pick me up around 5 o'clock on a Friday and bring me back a few days later, and I was thrilled. I packed my little suitcase, and that Friday afternoon, I walked eagerly out onto the front porch. I sat my little suitcase down. I waited because Nana was coming to get me. I felt so special. I didn't want to play with my brothers. I didn't want to eat dinner. I didn't want to do anything. Nana was coming to get me. That's what's happening. And hours passed, and I sat there. And eventually my dad came home from work. He's like, "What are you sitting here for?" And I'm like, "Nana's coming to get me. I'm going to Kansas." And she said, "Dinner's ready. You got to go inside." I'm like, "No, I'm going to wait for Nana." Finally, my parents agreed to make one of those very expensive long-distance phone calls back then to learn that Nana had canceled her trip and had completely forgotten about letting me know. So I was devastated. I was so devastated. I took my little suitcase back into the house in front of my brothers who were like, whatever. And I ate my little cold dinner, and I was not allowed to voice my disappointment. My dad was like, "Just go into your room till you can be happy. Stop crying. Forget about it." You know, I don't recall my grandmother ever mentioning it again, actually. That's the story. So Not too long ago, a spiritual healing teacher suggested that if I had an experience where I needed something different from an adult in my past, one path to healing would be to rewrite the script of that memory so that everyone involved said the things I wish they had said and done the things I wish they had done, had my needs been met. Wow. So I was curious, would that work? So I decided to give it a try. And I rewrote the script from that moment, and the moment that I was so gravely disappointed by the news that I wasn't going on my adventure. And I scripted my father as this understanding, caring, gentle father. I scripted my mother and my grandparents as nurturing my little tender, disappointed heart as they apologized for dashing my hopes and failing to communicate appropriately. And in my script, all the adults understood my vulnerability and gathered around and helped me understand how normal my excitement was and how normal my disappointment was. And that they thought it was appropriate that I would be angry and sad to be treated so carelessly. So through that journaling work, I suddenly could see how busy my grandmother must have been in that moment and probably disappointed herself that she wasn't going on the trip. I could see how frustrated my parents must have been and that their anger and gruffness was a mask for their embarrassment that they left me hanging there to feel all of these things for so many hours. And probably frustration they felt towards Nana for not calling, like for not letting me know, right? Suddenly I had greater compassion for them. And I could back up from my judgment of these adults that treated me so recklessly as a little girl. And to be honest, that particular event had a little bit of long-term impact on me, like my willingness to be excited about something and fear of disappointment when I do get excited about something. But the journaling exercise taught me the power of taking up a pen and rewriting a better script, a better story for myself so that I could shift the memory. It encouraged me to look at the experience from the viewpoint of everybody else involved, adult to adult. Not in my little 9-year-old mind, but in my old mind, right? My childhood self couldn't understand the experience from my parents' or grandparents' point of view, right? I couldn't. And up until now, I had been stuck in a childlike perspective of that event. But now that I'm an adult and a parent, I'm willing to release my original version of the truth, and I could shift and heal and release. I could see the whole thing from their perspective, and then I could bring the power of forgiveness and love into the situation. And my father and grandmother are no longer even alive. I can't even talk to them about it, right? Talk to my mom about it, she wouldn't even remember it, but I remember it. So I could start focusing on what I learned from that shameful experience to what it taught me as a parent, right? To focus on the learning part, I had to forgive the wounding part. Colin Tipping wrote a book called Radical Forgiveness, and he said, forgiveness is a journey and always starts from a starting point where forgiveness is absent. Think about that. You got to go to a place where forgiveness is absent to start the path of forgiveness. And reaching that place is a matter of choice. That's Colin Tipping. It's so true. Do you see the power of that? Over time, I want to do that same story retelling to a lot of my stories. Why? Because I'm determined to do my inner work and forgive anything that blocks my identity as worthy and whole and beautiful as a soul. And I have to take a look at any starting point where there's not forgiveness there and choose to heal. But guess what? I didn't come up with that whole healing thing by myself. I needed help. And that's my fourth point. If we're going to do our healing work, most of us are going to need some help to keep us focused on the healing part instead of the blaming part. And I've also seen people have a change of perspective and release, their wound instantaneously. It doesn't happen very often, but I have seen people go, oh, well, I never thought of it that way. All right, I'm done with that. That doesn't usually what happened. So who is on your healing team? I hope that this summer shows you that this community and I can be a part of your healing team. But there are probably others available to you too. Maybe it's a 12-step sponsor or a therapist or a group or a teacher or a good friend who's done their own healing work. Somebody, a counselor, a physician, someone can be on your healing team so that you can get free. Get free of it. We all need people around us who believe in the process of healing and can encourage us on our way as we discover the lessons our experiences are holding for us. We need them to remind us that our core nature, our truest self, is whole. And that finding our way back to experiencing that wholeness may take some time, but we aren't walking alone. You know, our society has come miles and miles in letting go of the stigma around getting professional mental health help. But I'm going to push that stigma just a few inches further. I believe in therapy. I believe in therapeutic healing models of all different kinds. I believe in using prescribed medication to help rebalance brain chemistry and relieve emotional pain. And my life reveals that belief. You know, my very first therapy appointment was when I was 23 years old. And I've been in therapy on and off ever since. Why? Because I wanted to heal. My first practitioner session was in 2002, and I've seen a practitioner on and off, or another minister on and off, for now 23 years. I have taken antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication here and there too. Why? Because all of those things and people have helped me heal. And in addition to all of that, I have read so many books, so many thousands of self-help books, self-healing, spirituality, philosophy, watched documentaries and podcasts and videos about healing and growth my whole life. It's just part of my personality. And then I became a counselor, and I became a coach, and I became a practitioner and a minister because all those kinds of people helped me, and I wanted to help others. Trust me, if I could heal and release through years and years of practice, anyone can. And now I've created a spiritual community around the concept of inviting spiritual power to aid me and others in healing. You know, there might be more social stigma around being in a spiritual community than there is for getting therapy, but here we are. We're here because we know this works. It takes a personal dedication to free yourself from the pain and shame and disillusionment that your childhood stuff delivered to you. It takes a deeply seated willingness to forgive and release everyone along the way who isn't helping you evolve. It takes an openness to learn from everything and heed the calling of your soul to move toward greater love, acceptance, and a better life filled with blessings. Do your inner work. Move from fear to love. Understand your wounds. Find a new story and get help with all of it. It's worth it because when you do, blessings really do get more abundant. I teach all of the time that heaven is a state of mind and so is hell. If your inner world is heavenly and peaceful, joyful, loving, your outer world will reflect that. Your reactions and responses and choices will be heavenly. The universe pours abundant energy through channels that are clear and loving. However, if your inner world is still fearful or judgmental or full of shame, your outer world can be quite hellish too, and that flow of energy gets blocked. So as we go through the summer ahead, and we look at different areas of your life, let us remember that our mindset and our inner world will quickly reveal to you what is yours to heal inside your own heart and mind. And then look around the room and see 37 other faces mirroring love back to you as we do this journey together and unleash the abundant blessings of good that are just there waiting for us to open ourselves to it. Will you join me in prayer? Here is what I know. What I know is this is a loving universe and that it is our birthright to step into the flow of everything good and magnificent. And I know that we are surrounded by a group of people and Spirit itself ready to bless us and help us and hold our hands as we go through this journey of healing and growing and evolving into the identity as a soul being. And so with gratitude, I know that the path opens before us as we go on this summer of blessings together. I know that we go through these lessons and these experiences and bloom. And I know that good is just going to flow in so powerfully. And so I just give thanks. I give thanks for each and every person in this room, whether they signed up for summer or not. They are be blessed by the growth of everyone around them as well. We are a unified group, so what is good for one is good for all. And so I let it go, I let it be, and I know it's going to be a magnificent summer, and it is well with my soul, and so it is. Thank you very much.